So the session is recorded. We're working out the budget to get the Thursday night session and this session online. It's just I think it's just a code that we gotta have, and we'll get it. But it is recorded. We ask that everybody on Zoom be muted, except for committee members who might be out there, in Zoom land. And they can chime in during the presentation if they need to. First, we're grateful for having this beautiful resource here for space and technology. It's really important that, you know, in our town, we've got a place where we can fairly comfortably gather. So the purpose of today's meeting and Thursday night's meeting was, for us, it felt huge. It was about 100 maybe, yeah. Between Zoom and people in the room, so this will be a little more informal, I think, today, besides gathering. Can everybody hear my voice all right?
Could be louder.
Could be louder.
Yes.
I would need a third hand, piece of microphone, I think that people will be able to do that. So the purpose for today is to share our thinking about what we've learned so far about the feasibility of creating a new flood resilient neighborhood for the lower village. And obviously in the whole town, but purposely connected to the neighborhood. We ask that you hold your comments and questions until after the presentation. We'll have plenty of time to answer questions. There are cards and pens and pencils in the back on the table if anybody feels that they might forget something as we're going along. So help yourself to that and move around now while I'm yammering on here. So I wanted to address how this whole thing kind of got started. First of all, so we've got the cards. Folks on Zoom, Kirsty will be monitoring the chat. And if you want to speak, you can raise your hand the way that's normally done. After the devastation, within days, Arian provided the spark of an idea of well, what can we do? We're clearly we've lost a neighborhood. It was obvious from the start to anybody down in the village that there's no rebuilding going on in parts of the village. By August, and it turned out it was August 2nd, I looked it up. We had a first meeting that created a group that eventually grew to 16 volunteers to explore this project. And from the start, there's been interest and encouragement from experts, state agencies, and foundations. I've been here 45 years, and I served for about 15 as a lister. There's some numbers that I think kind of help ground a discussion about Plainfield. When we moved here in 1980, the population was 1,249. The population for 2020 was 1,236. The school between 2010 and 2022 is down. So it's not a robust picture for 10. The flood is only, the results of the flood is only exacerbating this. But it's been something we should have been struggling with probably a bit harder through the years. And now I think there's an opportunity to look at that. We've seen commercial ventures come and go, but nothing is like, a Cabot cheese factory or anything on that side. We do not have around. There have been some new homes during that time. We've all probably seen them and been out on the roads, but they've all come from farming, and they've not taken advantage of the town plan, which has for a very long time had the idea of clustered housing. The terms have changed through the years, but the idea of putting houses in a dense area and then having green space available to them. We had, when we moved here in 1980, Martinetto already existed and the Sugarlands neighborhood already existed. And so there've been no new neighborhoods in Hudson. Like I say, we've lived in the hills for 45 years, but there's a lot of reasons to care about the village. And number one, it's part of our town. There's a lot of population in the village. And when I say, I mean, village is a lot larger than just the lower village. For right now, what we're talking about is the lower village. I think most everybody agrees that's what we consider the heart of our town. You know, it's where we go to celebrate. It's where strange things happen multiple times a year. It's really quite a lovely place. And it's where we have seen commercial ventures, you know, plus and minus throughout the years. Another reason that I really care is that, when I volunteered here right immediately after the flood for the few weeks that we were in real crisis mode. We saw hundreds of volunteers, help from agencies and organizations that I didn't even know existed. And beyond that, witness the trauma of what had actually happened to our fellow citizens. And it was not until then that I really truly understood what a community that lower village had become. The Hills is a whole different experience. We have a lovely community, but it's not the same when you're living in proximity with several hundred people. So it just, that's really focused me when I heard about this idea. And then our eroding catch base, and support for water and the wastewater system. So still, with all the good intentions aside, we have to make the numbers work for the town and prospective buyers, or this is not possible. And it has to work within the framework of what our town plan and our zoning says. And again, it's about so much more than numbers. And I want us all to keep that in mind as we're going through the presentation. And we'll have several folks from the committee speak. They will tell you, as they do, they'll introduce themselves, they'll explain why they're involved, and then whatever it is that is their part of the presentation. And then we'll have a question and answer period with them. So I hope that's clear to everyone, what we're up to. Okay, thank you. So Lauren,
Sure.
from the village will speak.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stand up so that everybody can hear me, hopefully. I'm Lauren Geiger. I live at 36 Hudson Avenue in a house that has been experienced flooding probably 5 times, but.
For two. Can you do 2 hands?
Sure, sure. Can people hear me now? Okay. So our house has experienced flooding a number of times, but by far the worst is this past July in 2024. And right now, I just wanted to talk about the feeling of living in the village now. It really feels kind of like a ghost town. The apartment building that's directly next to our house, where we were friendly with 4 individual women who lived there, is completely gone. One moved out of state, one moved in with her boyfriend, you know, just different scenarios. One's still having trouble finding housing. Likewise, across the brook from us, our neighbors who had a little girl, we used to watch her play in the brook and wave across the brook to her all the time. They're completely gone with piles of garbage and rubbish left there. And of course, you know, the Heartbreak Hotel is truly now a heartbreak. We used to walk along the rec road almost every day and meet and talk to neighbors in the Heartbreak, and they're all gone. And I know that one of them just was able to buy a house in Barry with her GoFundMe money. And while that's great, it's sort of an example of some of the people that might be leaving the village if we don't have more opportunities for them to stay. So we hate to lose the neighbors and the friends who we saw so often before the flood, people who intentionally chose to live in Plainfield and who love the village. I would say that my husband Peter and I are very excited about the prospect of revitalizing Plainfield Village and offering housing, not only to neighbors affected by the flood, but to other Vermonters seeking housing. There was an article in the Times Argus last week published by the Public Assets Institute, or citing stats from that about the loss of housing in Vermont, which is incredibly dramatic. And I know that there are people in Montpelier, Barry, East Montpelier, and other surrounding towns who are watching this project with a lot of interest, hoping that it might be a model that can help solve the housing crisis in general. I have a great deal of faith in this group. I've really enjoyed working with them, and I'm excited about creative solutions that are different from things that have been tried before, and seeing new housing on acreage that's out of the floodplain. I would love to see a revitalized village with new residents and new energy, more people to share the cost of living, and more people to become involved in the village. Thank you.
Yeah, it was Kate. Maybe is Kay gonna go next?
Yeah.
Or Warren, do you want to introduce Kay? Do you want to introduce
Can you
Kay?
hear me okay on this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm a lot of y'all's face from Cleverly work. That's cool to do. Can you hear me okay now? I was just saying, I recognize faces here from, that I saw out on the street doing Cleverly in my neighborhood, so it's nice to see you again. My name's Kay Wilson. I've been living in Plainfield for about a decade now. Probably a lot of you don't know me because I was living on the bigger side of Country Club Road with 5-acre lots where you don't know your neighbor's name. But about what would have been 2 years ago, me and my partner started looking for land to permanently settle here. And no, it would have been 3 years ago now. And we spent about 2 years in the process of looking for land. There was no building lots available unless we wanted to move to Darien. We wanted to stay close to our community here. I think the options we were looking at were talking to people who had larger lots and dividing their lots into, again, 5-acre lots where you don't know your neighbor. And we were looking at the price of that. A lot of that was probably after purchasing the lots and developing them. We could have been looking at about $200,000 before we began constructing our house. And we have a joint income of $65,000 a year. That's, I work with children, you know, that's not gonna work for us. So we're very fortunate to, Pete and Lauren reached out to us and offered to sell another lot they had on Hudson, 55 Hudson. It had a single wide that needed to be torn out, that was no longer livable. So we spent 3 months doing that and are now constructing a couple small dwellings there right now. I'm sure most of you have walked that street and seen a 400 square foot ADU we're building right now. I'm building that for my mother, and then we're gonna build another 1,000 square foot ADU. Are you able to get a picture? Nope, that's fine. And we're able to build 2 structures because the town, I think, very generously allows an additional ADU in addition to every building, which is great. And that lot is 0.33, so a third of an acre, and
This is a
about
photo shoot.
maybe an eighth of an acre in buildable land.
Okay,
So-
this is the photo you wanted to show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a, like a micro village, micro neighborhood that the architect who we bought plans from, he developed small neighborhoods. We're using some of his plans, but also inspiration for how he uses green space and how he can build neighborhoods out with small houses that are affordable for people in our income bracket. And also a single couple without children, which is probably a lot of us now. Let's see, what else did I want to say about this? Yeah, we're doing a self-build. Even though we're doing the build ourselves, we're still looking at 200 square foot about, which is just the reality of building. 2025, its materials are up, and wages are up, but also costs are up. So again, we're sticking small. I think we are probably an example of the people who would be interested in these lots. I mean, I think a lot of different people would be, but I just want to talk about myself as one example of the people who are interested in these lots and interested in living in community and not living in a divided 5-acre lot with no neighbors. And my experience since, despite the flood, in part because of the flood, moving to the village and being in the village has just been one of community. And I love it. Our neighborhood is like our block. There's young people, there's old people, families and retired people, conservatives and liberals, and we're all just in the neighborhood together. And I think that's what I moved to the village for. And I'm really sorry that I might be seeing a lot of them leave. And so I'd be very excited to see the village expand to fill that void. And I would be very excited if anybody wants to talk afterwards, or reach me on Facebook at Kay Wilson. The
answer any questions people might have about what it actually looks like building. I have a lot of numbers and the cost of building. And yeah, I think I'd be very excited if anybody wanted to talk about the practicalities of that. I'd also be happy to write something up for people to read to kind of get an understanding of what that'd be. But I'm just really excited to see some of the housing we lost being replaced and to have more neighbors whose houses I can walk to.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Eli. I'm gonna talk about some of the impacts of the flood and yeah, I lived in the Heartbreak, which was the building that Aaron owned, and I lived there with a bunch of neighbors. I loved living there. I met Pete and Lauren through my roommates who they met just waving on the side of the road while they were walking by, right? So yeah, I loved living next to the rec field and that was really nice. So right, we started meeting as a group just of citizens, and these are the goals that we've come up with in the 5 months since we started meeting. So I'm gonna read them off just so that everybody can hear them, hopefully. So one of the goals is to rehouse those affected by the flood. I was a renter before the flood, I'm a renter now. It's really hard to find housing. So rehousing would be great. Improving the situation from before the flood would be great too. The second goal is to provide additional affordable housing amidst Vermont's housing crisis. It feels like it's a national housing crisis or global. Number 3 would be include a mix of single family homes, duplexes, tiny houses, and apartments. Yeah, even the accessible single family homes feel outside of my budget or my ability. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how anything's possible, right? But working on this project has felt like a direction, and that's felt like something good. Number 4 is revitalizing the town, prioritizing flood displaced and the other Plainfield residents. It was really nice to live next to something that people walked by us to get to. I would love, if this development happens, I would love if there were something that people were walking towards, so that somebody sitting on the porch could wave and say hi. I love that part of living in town. Number 5 is restoring the lost tax base. I don't know that we're gonna list some numbers here. I don't know what will be lost. It depends on FEMA buyouts, it depends on the Goddard project. That we had no idea what was going on with the Goddard project when we started meeting, and I don't know what's gonna happen now, and then number 6 for place infrastructure in 2025. So hopefully building infrastructure in 2025 with homes ready as early as 2026, which feels really fast. And the best time to do this would have been 10 years ago, right? I don't know. Yeah, so doing it as fast as possible feels reasonable, and I don't know if it is reasonable. And then number 7 is trying to have this project be cost neutral for the town. I don't know what that means. Yeah. Next slide would be great. Yeah. Okay, so this is a list of what we lost in the flood. It's been really hard to communicate information, and it feels like the details are flexible. But here are some numbers: 28 buildings with 39 dwelling units. That's if all of the FEMA buyouts are accepted, right? If your home was severely damaged, right, so you can't live there anymore, and then the offer that FEMA comes back to you with, if it's accepted, right, you might not financially be able to accept that offer. I don't know what the situations are, right? But then number 2, 11% of the grand list for the town taxes. I don't know who got that number, but that number is being disputed by the project at Goddard. no idea what those impacts are gonna look like. So this is kind of a worst case scenario, but we're in a scenario, right? Yeah. Number three, the water, sewer and customers, up to 29 allocations, 16 are confirmed lost, and 29 are potentially lost. I don't know how that's offset by the Goddard project.
Won't
No impact?
Won't necessarily change.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then 60 people displaced. At least, which feels like a lot, yeah. There are some images of, I think that's what's next, yeah, of the destruction. Yeah, so it's been tough to, yeah. As a renter, it was hard, right, like. Trying to find a place where your rent is low enough that you can build up your equity or security or whatever you want to call it in your life. By buying furniture, right? Is that the best? But right, like trying to improve and gain some security in your life. And then losing all of that is pretty sad and hard, and it's. Yeah, working on this project has felt, I don't know if it's an exercise in futility, but it's felt like something I could do. So, yeah, next slide. Great. This is a map of the town that Michael created. There's two maps. So just for some orientation, Mill Street on the left there's the rec field with the parking lot. The heartbreak is notable to me. So the circled buildings are buildings that were impact and are in process for FEMA buyouts, if I'm understanding correctly. And then the buildings with the arrows are were threatened but are not in process for FEMA buyouts. So then the next slide shows what the town could look like if those buyouts go through. If the buyout goes through and then the owner accepts the buyout, the building would be demolished and then could not be built again. Nothing could be built on that land again. And I think the land would be sold back to the town. Given back to the town, right? Not sold. So it wouldn't necessarily look like this, right? Those are just like infill green spaces. There could be flood resilient infrastructure there, but there couldn't be housing. Yeah. Next slide, next set of slides, I think that's it for me. Yeah, I tried to take up some time. I just wanted to highlight, there's a massive amount of housing insecurity, right? And the reason I've been working on this project is not just because of the impact that the flood had on me, but I'm hoping that this project is a way to improve, just to lift people up a little bit, right? As many people as we can. I don't know, I'm still scared of, right, like only lifting up the people who can afford the $300,000 house instead of the $500,000 house, which doesn't feel equitable either, but I've just been trying real hard. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Here's
Did you want to speak?
somebody.
No, I don't. Did you go back?
And here or one more?
Oh, that's great right there. I'm Rick Burrows, and compared to Mary, I'm a relative newcomer to Plainfield. I moved here 9 years ago. And I remember thinking, well, they're cleaning up from that flood, and my experience of living in Montpelier for quite a while said that, this is probably going to be a while before there's another flood. We'll be fine for a bit. That hasn't worked out to be the case. In the last couple of years, we've had 2 more floods, and what really started to make me anxious was the discussion of losing 36 houses.
You put the mic closer.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
thank you.
Either I'm gonna holler or I'm gonna put the mic closer, whichever one works the best. So, losing 36 houses, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a huge loss. This is really important. And also, it's really urgent. And I think that when something like this happens, a lot of people lose faith, but it actually is a tremendous opportunity. Could you scroll ahead? And I've been an architect for 30 years and I've worked on public processes throughout Vermont. Helped bring buildings to communities and looking at somebody who knows that. And it's been a lot of fun and there are a lot of unknowns with it too. You don't know everything prior to deciding to do a project. We just don't know it. What we do is we make provisions for the things that we don't know and we move forward. And I've often looked at this site outlined in blue at the corner of East Hill and Main Street and thought, wow, that's really the only place that you could ever do anything to enhance the village outside of the village. It's really the only spot that I could see. But I just kept driving by it, didn't really think much about it. And then when the flood happened, I started talking to people and I thought, gosh, there's already a group working on trying to do something with this site. And more amazingly to me, the owners were interested in selling the property potentially, or at least entertaining the idea of using it to expand the village. And I thought, wow, that's really something that almost never comes together in a project like this. Usually the land sales are a real stumbling block. Go ahead. So today, this is the process that we've been through, and I think everybody can read through it. But what we've been doing in a very, very rapid way is pulling together a group of people who are interested in trying to do something positive and proactive about the lack of resilience that we find ourselves having in the village. It's that resiliency that we need to enhance, and we've got to get out in front of it, in my opinion. And so a public survey was done, a lot of good response to that. A study of prior work that was done and started to engage people, both state and nonprofits, that were very, very supportive of it. And I think there's a tremendous time window right now to do something. There's interest in what we're doing. Now's a window where we can potentially get people to help us. We did some site assessment and some preliminary infrastructure, engineering and costing. If we were to buy the land and resell it into lots, what would it cost to do that? And how would it be funded? So that's what we've been working on, and it's a tall order. And we won't give you all the answers, but we've tried to take into account the things that we don't know, which are risky to us, and associate a way to deal with the risk. Here's our group. Somebody on the group here. And if you don't, feel free to reach out to any of us and talk more if you'd like. Okay. Here are the public survey results. And really a lot of them have already been discussed in the goals that we talked about. But really trying to expand the existing village as best we can and as close to the center of the village as we possibly can. And then a list of cautions that came out of the survey. And there's some real good ones here, things to watch out for, things that we're concerned about. And a lot of them are really geared towards trying to make the village be like the village and just expand what it already is. And I think the planning efforts that have been going on really do address a lot of these issues. And that's where one way that these issues will be addressed. I think another way that they'll be addressed is by our group as we try and make this a vital part of Plainfield. Here's some prior work that's been done by the current landowners. They looked at developing it in a very different way, in a bit more of an intentional community. I think they found it cost prohibitive. And so development is is of course limited by being able to make the money work on it. And we've done some mapping of the ecology of the land, and then interestingly enough, we got some interest as far away as the UPenn Urban Study students doing student efforts in looking at this site, seeing what could be done with it. So there's a body of work out there that students have done. And when I look at this group, I say, wow, you know, we've got some potential support right now. My experience is that this tends to evaporate. People lose interest in us over time if we don't act quickly. I think my grandfather called that striking when the iron is hot. And that's what we're trying to do. So if it feels like we're moving fast, we're also trying to move to keep the interests of people like the Vermont Community Foundation, which Arian will talk more about in a bit. But we've got an interest in potentially even partnership that we'll address from some of these other groups here in helping to make this a reality. So it's really encouraging that people are trying to help us out here. So Sandy, and I assume you're listening, Sandy, from away, she's traveling, has been a volunteer to our process and has been our lead on assessing the sites and trying to make a real sense of what the site is, how viable it is. Could you even develop it? What are the challenges of it? And there are some, and we feel like we've uncovered them, and we feel like we're working hard to mitigate whatever risks there might be associated with it. Whether it be wetlands, dealing with the soils, dealing with the grade, all those things we're working on trying to make sense out of. So this is the current zoning map. And I want to get first of all, I want to talk about those gray lines. They really all converge in one spot. And a lot of people have talked about sort of the heart and soul of the village. And I use the village in terms of the way I've always used the village. The village is a part of a town, and that's where everything comes together in terms of roads. Everything really sort of radiates out from that yellow zone that you see. And that's why we all come together there from a geographic standpoint. The yellow is the part of the zoning map which is zoned village. The rest of it is really zoned for an entirely different use, which is much less dense. And that is really quite sustainable, allows people to walk, allows more people to walk and use public transportation. And I think that's a key part of what this potentially does. It allows a lot more overlap, and that synergy can be wonderful. I've lived right in the middle of Montpelier for over 30 years, and that really has some real advantages. The bright green area is our site. Everything that you see and hear about, we've considered as part of village zoning. It's been that way, and it continues to be that way, and will continue. So all village development can happen there, and we're trying to make the most of it by taking control of it as the community through a grassroots effort. So Sandy and the engineers have been working on developing costing and really trying to understand what the impact is from a preliminary standpoint so that we can pull together costs for the infrastructure and site development of the site in question. And that involves looking closely at the land, trying to understand what's there, what the challenges are for the land, and then also where we would run water, wastewater, roads, and stormwater, and what we would leave open ultimately. Not all the land can be developed, and probably not all of it would want to be developed. That's just really a part of this kind of a project. We're really lucky to have our efforts paid for by a grant through the Vermont Community Foundation. And that's just been fantastic. So we've been able to get preliminary engineering on the site to understand what the costs would potentially be prior to a bond vote. That typically won't be the be all and end all of all costs, but it does give us a very good starting point through the estimating process. And then we add in other costs that Arian will talk about to mitigate the risk that I was mentioning.
Great, thank you, Rick. Hi, folks. My name's Arian Marie. I live up on Fowler Road in East Hill, and I owned the Heartbreak and what's left of it still today. And as others have mentioned, I think the day after the floods, coming down in the village and just seeing the sort of carnage that was there, felt very disempowering. Felt like, oh my gosh, like these forces have just come in here and taken all these things. And I'm sure while it wasn't my home, and I don't understand what that would be like for that to be my home, like some of you that are in the audience today. It definitely hit me. And, you know, I hadn't owned that building as long as some, but it is a crazy thing to see buildings that are over 100 years old that had lived through the flood of 1927 and all these other huge floods that we hear of. And they're not there anymore. So that, for me, it was like, what can we do? You know, because it feels like if we can do something with this, we can, we have a little bit more power of control of our destiny, and we're not victims of the circumstances that have been thrown at us. And so how do we adapt, as is sort of the common saying around climate change? And, I went and talked with Bram and asked him if this was something he was still interested in, because I know he had considered developing land up there, and he said, you know, if the town, if that's what the town wants, I'm open to talking about it. And I talked with Jim Bowles, the select chair at the time, and we just had an initial meeting with the select board to say, hey, is this something that's interesting? And it seemed that it was something that had traction. You know, all things start off as an idea, and we started off as a citizen group, and we're still a citizen group, and we have no power and no authority to do anything. But like many things in this world, ideas often come from the ground. And I feel like we put together a pretty good plan as a really thoughtful group, many of which who have professional backgrounds, such as Rick and Beto and Sandy in architecture and design and planning, and Will Colgan, is planning commission chair, also part of this group. So, you know, there's also some folks who I've heard say, well, what's in it for you? And for me, at a very personal level, I like Plainfield. I would go so far as to say I love it. And having a town that feels like has energy and vibrance, and looking at that map to see where, oh my goodness, like all these buildings are going to be gone. And this is like a third of our town that we just cut the heart out of. And that feels tough. And so this notion that we can build on that and actually expand the village feels really positive and really hopeful. And I hope that feels that way for others as well. So the proposal here today is, I think, why that I'm going to go through the section is really talking about the numbers and the math. And this proposal would be for the town to purchase this land and develop it. And this is not something that towns do very much these days, but it is how towns did it many years ago. And the town as a village in Plainfield was cut up originally in the lots that we see now today by the administration of the town at the time, and sold to those respective homeowners. So this is in some ways an old concept that circled back around. So this is the buildable area that we're looking at building at. You can see that we really need to have two roads in and out, both for emergency services, and also because the access off of Main Street would be a little too steep for fire trucks and the like, especially if both sides one. So we would have one that goes back to East Hill, but I think the dominant road would really be that one to Main Street, which is it's kind of across the street from the park and ride, is a way to think about that. And then we would come out into the buildable area here, where I'm sorry, in white, thank you. And that buildable area, this is the base map that we are looking at using. Many of you have heard that we're going to have a design workshop, as we really want to have this be a community effort, as we can do in the circumstances, rather than if this were being developed by private developers. How we lay out the lots on this land and the roads can be developed by the town, and that is the intention, to come up with at least one design. Maybe we have a couple designs that we have for further discussion on February 8th. So folks that are interested in that, It is, we are asking that just to be for Plainfield residents only, because this is a town vote, but if somebody was a Plainfield resident who was displaced by the flood, we're also saying you should definitely come. You are part of the community, even if you are not able to live in this town at this time. The goal on that day, it is an ambitious goal, and we are taking 5 hours to do it, so it is a big time commitment. But to really do, it's called a design charrette, will be facilitated by a number of architects, some who are on our committee, and then also additional architects in the area who are volunteering their time to facilitate that as a workshop. And this, as I understand it, because some of this is new to me, is a common design process that people use with group. So how we lay out the roads, what the green space is, where if there are foot trails and other stuff like that, the intention is to have that be a community process so that we can really design this area in a way that the town, as often many things in town are the folks who show up, can really work through that. So I think that's very exciting, and I hope folks will RSVP for that. We are asking for that, so we have a head count. Yeah. So what's this gonna cost? So the top line number on this, as we're estimating, and I'll really talk about how we get to this, is $2.5 million. And this is not a number that I or anybody else in the steering committee came up with. We have hired a team of engineers to develop what it would take to put in this infrastructure, which primarily there are, as over here, roads, water and sewer, stormwater, electricity. We have, this also includes final engineering, legal fees through land sales, surveying and final plats. There's a lot of miscellaneous things that you have to do when you develop a piece of property, having to do with erosion control, general conditions, etc. There's a significant contingency, and then also a amount of money in the budget for managing the construction project and the sales. So there are, we have tried to account for everything. We've put contingencies upon contingencies, and this is a sort of like our worst case scenario, total maximum cost, $2.5 million. In some ways, this is a big number. In other ways, to put it in perspective, the bridge that we're looking at in town to replace the Mill Street Bridge, which is going to take 4 to 5 years to put in, is estimated right now to cost between $3.5 and $4 million. And as some other folks have said, nobody lives there and it doesn't pay taxes. But we do need the bridge. I don't want to dismiss it, but just keeping things in perspective. So the real question is, how can we pay for this as a town? And we have a proposal about how that will work, and we think it's a good proposal. And how do we do it in such a way that doesn't put the town at risk? This would be an investment on behalf of the town. Here's how we think the town could pay for it. But we also need to recognize that we're investing in multiple things when we do something like this. We're investing in our neighbors and housing and having a community. And we're also investing significantly in a long-term return on the tax base that this would generate. Next slide, please. So how do we pay it back? So if we take, the short answer is we pay it back by selling the lots on the land as buildable lots that have roads, water, and sewer to them. And we do it at prices that we think are pretty reasonable prices. We have consulted with some real estate agency on these prices, and the feedback we got is that all of these are actually below market in terms of what is actually available. And I know that particularly on the $95,000, I couldn't believe that that was below market, but apparently, and we've seen this, there are comparables in Barrie that have sold recently, quarter-acre lots with a bit of a view, and they're selling for over $100,000. So that is, I know sometimes it's a little bit of a shocker, but it actually is where the market that we're in right now. And I think Kay's point earlier about, if you can find anything to build on, you're lucky at any price. So the goal from the perspective of the steering committee is, and this also came out of the survey results, affordability is really important to folks on the steering committee. It's really important to folks in this town. And one thing that I think is really important to make clear about that is the way that we can make lots affordable is by having smaller lots. And so there has been some discussion in town about a new zoning and minimum lot size. And I understand that there are people on both sides of that conversation. The thing that with regard to this project is important to emphasize, if we have smaller lot sizes, we can make those lots more affordable. The project still works either way. If the zoning is not passed with the minimum lot size, we can still sell quarter-acre lots or 1/5 of an acre lots. We just can't sell 1/8 of an acre lots. And either way it works. but we make it more accessible and more affordable if we can sell smaller lots. So that's the distinction that I think is important, and why this project, in some ways, has been linked to this new zoning, because it will have an impact, but the project can proceed either way. But we would love to be, if we are able to bring this project in under budget, which I'm optimistic that we can, trying to propose to reduce the prices on the smallest lots to make those even more affordable, I think has been a goal that's been voiced by the steering committee. Obviously, it becomes a town project at that point, and there's the select board and other actors that are involved, but that would certainly be our recommendation about what to make more affordable, the smaller lots. So as you can see, this is a count of 41 lots, and if we had only quarter acre lots, we would actually have a smaller lot number, but the total land area would be about the same. There's 23 acres up there, and this only uses less than 9 of those acres to get us to break even on the price. And this pays back the principal associated with the loan. But the town would have to borrow money, and what we have proposed to the select board is a vote by Australia, because it has to be by Australian ballot, for the town to borrow, this would be coming up at town meeting, for the town to borrow up to $2.5 million for a period of up to 10 years. And I'll talk about the $2.5 million amount. That's because that's the most we could see this project possibly costing, and we'd like that to be less, but that's what we have to budget for our engineers. And why up to 10 years, I'll explain that in a second. So how do we cover the loan interest? So if we have 10 lots that we sell, that we can sell right away, and I'll get to a second why we think we actually can sell these right away. We've heard from Kay and others that it's impossible to find any lots, and we actually have some leads that go in that direction, but I think that was a nice, realistic perspective from somebody who is living in town with the rest of us. If we can sell 10 lots for an average price of $50,000, which is actually a low average compared to the last page, that amounts to $500,000 that we get out of the gate, that we don't have to borrow, hopefully. And then new taxes, and this is saying new taxes at an average price of $4,000 per year in new taxes. And there's a couple of things we can talk through about that, but the median house, the median building in Plainfield House paid about $5,500 in taxes last year. So this is saying new money on the tax rolls, 4,000, we're even putting that lower. We do have the first year, there would be no buildings, so that tax revenue will be reduced. We have spoken about how we can actually roll that first year into the loan. It's factored into the budget, because obviously you don't spring up, just throw seeds in the ground and you get a house. Loan interest, so we have, the Vermont Community Foundation is interested in loaning us this money. Many people may be familiar with them. They are a large, credible community foundation. They are the ones that gave us $35,000 for preliminary engineering for this. They say they're gonna send you a check and they send you a check. That's what they do. The principal is paid back as lots sell. $2.5 million less $500,000 in pre-sales equals a $2 million loan. $2 million loan times 2% equals $40,000 in annual interest. Therefore, selling 10 lots gives us up to 10 years to sell the rest. And the reason why we're saying 10 years is because that feels, at least to us on the steering committee, like the most prudent thing we can do. Because we think that the lots will sell that much faster, but we think that also from the voters and the taxpayers in Plainfield, we want to hedge that risk in our favor, and we want to make this as safe and comfortable as possible. So we're saying, let's give ourselves 10 years to do this, because if there are a few lots that take a fair amount of time, a 10-year time horizon is a long time to sell all those lots. Next slide, please. So why do we think we can pre-sell 10 lots? One is we have been circulating a survey that is more about buyer interest and lot sizes. And we have 25 families that have filled out the prospective buyer interest form at this time. Some of those people are flood impacted with pending FEMA buyouts. Some of them are folks who've been looking for lots or land in the area. That does not mean that all of them are going to sign up and buy a lot, but I think it's very reasonable to say that a fraction of those will, and that that's a real number. The other thing that we also have pre-commitment letters from, and the reason I say it's a pre-commitment is because we don't have a green light on this project. Nobody's going to send us a letter promising to buy land on a project that we don't know for sure is going to go forward. But Downstreet, who is a well-known affordable housing organization, is interested in buying 5 single-family lots and building single-family homes. And this They do it under what they call a shared equity arrangement, which means they build a $250,000 house and they sell it for less than $150,000 to people who are below 80% of area median income. So in terms of providing affordable housing, it doesn't mean it's easy. I know that's a stretch for some people, but you can get a mortgage and it does make it more accessible and affordable to folks. The second organization that we also received a letter from expressing a lot of interest in this is Habitat for Humanity, also an organization I'm sure many people are familiar with. They do a lot of housing projects around Vermont. They've committed to buy 5 lots for duplexes that these would become owner occupied housing. Those houses would be sold to the people who would live in them. And they are it's a little bit cut off, but this is actually a rendering of a duplex that they're building in Randolph, thank you. Yeah, that they're building in Randolph right now. They're doing a number of these. That doesn't mean that they are using the same design everywhere, but it is an example of what some of their housing looks like. And these are, people get a mortgage on these and they buy them. They also do have a labor commitment, as some people are familiar with Habitat for Humanity. So that's why we think 10 is an easy bar to clear. We think that we can get there between individual interest and we're just starting to spread the word even more. So I think we likely will see more people interested in that prospective buyer form and putting their name down. The timeline that we're looking at here is the community design workshop. It's here at the Opera House on February 8th. We are asking folks to RSVP. Just so we have like a real head count for that, because we're gonna have facilitators for tables in groups of 8 or 10. We have proposed the select board an Australian ballot item for the March 4th town meeting vote to approve financing of the project. It's really important to recognize again that this is a proposal that we are proposing. We have a bunch of details that we are furnishing. We're all interested in seeing the project move forward, but once it becomes a town project, it does fall under the jurisdiction of the select board. And how they directly decide to move the project forward after that, should the vote pass, is going to be up to the select board. We would propose that we would have at least an advisory committee of citizens that would work on the project and would be an officially appointed committee to try to oversee things moving forward. May, we see local zoning permits approved, going through that process. There's quite a bit of permitting that would have to happen through the DRB. That's here in town. That's a 3-person board that is part of the town, appointed by the town. And they are required to review all subdivision plans. This would be considered a major subdivision under current town zoning and proposed town zoning. Lot sales would begin in June and July. We are going to recommend that Flood's Place residents have a priority. The project costs, construction costs, we expect the bids to come in by then, so we would have clear construction costs. We would need to have those construction costs to finalize lot prices because the project does have to balance. So that's how we know that we can get those two to line up. And then all state permits approved. Then we were looking at construction of roads, utilities, and other infrastructure with possible house construction beginning in late October. This is an ambitious schedule. Nobody's going to say that it's not. One thing that's important to keep in mind is at this point in time, we will be well over a year since the floods and well over 2 years since the floods of 2023. And we're also looking at, we're going to know on the buyouts, because I am also the volunteer buyout coordinator for the town. We're going to hear back on those buyouts quote sometime in February, according to the state, and that most folks are looking, if they accept the buyout and everything goes through, they're looking at closing on those buyouts before the end of 2025, which means that if we have these properties ready to sell and ready to move on, that timing works out quite well, and those folks can actually take their buyout checks and start to work on some of these properties and move in that direction. So if the goal is really to help flood and flood displaced people, this timing is significant that we do it within this kind of time frame. And as others have said, we found remarkably that many people in many state agencies are giving us preferential, they're speeding up our requests for information. They're speeding up how coming out to the field site to review various things. That we have, I think, many people's experience with bureaucracies is they kind of move at the speed that is slow. We've seen it actually that people are picking up the pace for us in light of these circumstances, and the fact that it is a town-led endeavor will also make us eligible for a fair amount of state funding that would not be eligible to various private developers. So do we have? Thank you. You know, we want your input. I think we're gonna turn to the Q&A kind of session, part of the conversation now. Did just want to reiterate, please come to the community design workshop on February 8th and RSVP, and then these slides will be posted online, and as will additional information sometime this coming week. And there are some additional handouts in the back that have the website, and the RSVP information is on the website, so that folks can RSVP for that. So thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to invite the steering committee members to come up here, and Michael is gonna
I'm gonna go across it.
yeah, thank you.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Michael Billings, the first and managing director. I first moved to Plainfield in 53 years ago to the renovation sergeant. And this is very exciting from my perspective because, first of all, a lot of my neighbors have disappeared. I look out from 40 feet away from the village, right in the middle of the village, and I'm one of the only houses that was spared in that near floodplain area. And I know we want to really hear everybody, you want to really hear everybody who has had something to contribute to this process. So first of all, going back to something we said earlier, there was a survey sent out, and the number of people who responded to that survey was huge. I mean, in terms of what typically survey percentages are, I think it was 70 people, right, Aaron?
Over, yeah.
Over 70 people, which is a remarkable participation. We really need that information. And those of you who are online and those of you who are here in the room, even if you feel this is really scary or you're upset about something, or you want to be able to get hard answers to questions that you're working on, or however you want to do it, we really want to hear your voice. So I'm going to do something I'm really bad at, which is to try and keep track of people who want to ask a question. And I don't know the names of half the people in the room, but if you want to speak after this introduction is over, please just put up your hand. Where's Eli? Okay, can you, maybe you should move to a seat where you can get up easily. But Eli will bring the mic to you, and then alternating with Kirsty's help, with people who are online with questions, so that you can be set up and you can either stay where you are or you can take a seat in the front. It's up to you. I really want to encourage you, whatever you feel about this, so please express yourself. Thank you.
Thanks. Who's our first question? Thanks for being here.
I don't know if I need that, actually.
Okay.
My name's Elena. I live over at Martin Meadow.
If you could use the mic though, just because it helps people online here, thank you.
Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Perfect.
I just wanted to point out on the slides, for representing what it would look like to go 17 homes away. You didn't have the slide of the whole village where you have the vibrant Main Street, you know, on there. And so I felt like it was a little bit misrepresented, you know, to make it look kind of more what we're getting at. Do you understand what I mean? Like, in the next slide, after that, where you're showing the A, B, and C, you can see Main Street and you can see how vibrant it still is on Main Street at least. So I'm just pointing that out.
Are you talking about Route 2 or Main Street?
Main Street, where Positive Pie is.
Oh,
Okay, because that's not on that picture. So when you show them disappearing, you show it kind of empty, when actually there still is a road with a lot of houses there. So in the next slide after that, you can see it. And I just felt like I wanted to point that out, because I saw people go, oh, you know, and it really, it's not quite as much so. And I don't, this question probably isn't maybe appropriate, but I'm wondering how much Kate paid for the lot that she got from her neighbor.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk like in depth about pricing if anybody wants to know more, and I might be writing something up for the FAQ. We were very generously sold that lot at 42,000. We were not able to find anything even comparable. That was a very, we were very fortuitous, like we just jumped so fast when we had that offer. I mean, previously, we've been looking at a house on Old Main that got bid up to over $100,000, that was probably a tear down. And with that $42,000, of course, there was about 3 months that it took us to kind of clear the site to begin the site work. And one of the reasons I talk about that being so incredibly affordable too is that that meant we had to do no road work, we didn't have to put in a well, we didn't have to put in a septic. I mean, I know that some people are maybe like looking at those, what are they, quarter acre lots for 95,000 and pretty surprised that that's affordable, but yes, you could find 10 acres somewhere in Vermont, not too far, for $100,000, but I mean, you could be looking at $300,000 before you can even begin your bill. So, when I looked at those numbers, man, I would have jumped on those lots. I would have been so thrilled, so.
Okay.
I think we're gonna alternate between questions in the room and questions online, but I will bring them over here.
So, yeah, sounds like there's nobody who's asked one online yet, so we'll keep going, yeah.
Thanks. I just want to say thank you all for all the work that you've done. It's amazing. I really appreciate it. Like, wow, we've been working for a long time. Thank you. And I'm curious, how, say there's all these people who want to buy these lots or want to buy the duplexes. How do you decide who gets to buy it? Is it just who can pay the most? I know you're prioritizing, but I'm curious, what does that actually look like? How you decide? Whoever you is.
Does somebody want to take that, or you want me
Yeah,
to take that, or?
who decide that?
I think
So-
you want to take.
I can respond to that just a little bit. I mean, with regards to somebody like Down Street or Habitat for Humanity. With regards to somebody like Down Street or Habitat for Humanity, they do have their own processes that are sort of very well codified in the sense that they've been doing this a long time. We have asked if they could also include in their criteria a preference for people who already live in Plainfield or were displaced by the floods. They've said that that's something they would consider, but they couldn't necessarily guarantee. In terms of the proposed, we've talked quite a bit about how could we rank and provide for a system where we could offer preferential treatment to people who already live in Plainfield or were displaced by the floods. Ultimately, we can make a recommendation to the select board that will then be subject to, larger conversation. But I think the intention from the group has really been, how do we prioritize people who already live in town and or were displaced? And potentially looking at other ranking criteria in terms of, do they live in, are they Vermont residents? Like we could kind of do a scoring where, and the more points you have, move you higher up on the choice level so that you can choose first. So, but I think that is something that we are also planning on talking about on the design workshop day, to continue to get more input from folks about the best way to do that. The good thing is that we have a fair bit of time to figure that specific thing out. But great question.
Yeah, so.
It's probably off the subject, but this whole housing thing is actually very exciting. What
Could you
about?
identify yourself, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Jeannie Lamacus. I live on what's left of the Brook Road. What if the brook floods again, down in here? We've already had problems with the Route 2 in 2 spots. Who pays for that if we get hit again? I mean, we gotta pay for this bridge, right? I mean, isn't that out of town, taxpayers' money? No?
No, I can answer that.
Oh, cool, okay. So, but my question is, what if it floods again? What's gonna happen to people like, what's her name, Laura? People living down in that area again? Is it gonna get hit? What are we doing to? We have to pay anything to stop this from happening again, or?
Thank you. I'm also on the hazard mitigation committee, so we're looking ahead to all that same stuff. And one of the things that we know is that we can't guarantee that it won't flood again. Most of the people who are in flood endangered zones have put their house up for buyout, but then they're still living in their houses. There are 16 people living at the bottom of Hudson Avenue or on the Mill Street intersection next to it. Some of whom are in this room, and I know I worry about them a lot. So big projects like the bridge that was discussed, Arian threw up the number of 4.5 to 5 million for the Mill Street Bridge. These are projects where the town pays a percentage of that cost, but definitely not most of it. It comes from the federal and state government, and that's just something that requires a ton of planning and why it's so slow, but it is a joint project with the town playing the smallest percentage. In the case of the Brook Roads, the Brooks behavior in the village, I'm pretty pessimistic that it's finished doing its stuff. And there are, I'm trying actually to get a bunch of river engineers, worked very hard on this last week to evaluate how much the brook might need to be widened in the village itself, so it doesn't back up and end up going over property again. So we're thinking about that very aggressively.
I'm Glenda Bissix, I live up in the hills, but I know that many people displaced by the flood in the village were renters. And we've been talking and listening today about buying lots. These are not people who can buy lots and build a house. I know there are some apartment buildings that are part of the design at the moment, and those would be rented, although I don't know if there's any guarantee as to what the rents might be. But I'm just wondering about what provision there is for people who are without housing at the moment because they've been flooded out and they were renters and they cannot afford to buy lots and build a house.
Who wants to try for that one? One piece of information that feels critical is Down Street's minimum construction size is 25 unit apartment buildings, which feels a little unreasonable for Plainfield. That feels more reasonable for Barry or Montpelier, which is where they've done development, but yeah.
One thing I forgot to say earlier is that yellow zone that was pointed out by Rick, that is the village zoned area is called mixed use residential. So it isn't just houses. It isn't just one single family house. It can include multiple unit housing. It also can include somebody who wants to put a farm stand there so that there's a walkable source of food. There are lots of options we haven't yet heard back from because we don't have anything particularly to offer developers in terms of what this project is going to look like when you want to walk in and work on it. But I think we're going to hear people who want to do multi-unit housing. I mean, that's sort of in our presumption in our discussions.
Sandy also has a hand raised virtually.
Nice.
I don't know, can you folks hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. So that's been a part of the committee's discussions from day one. And there are a number of ways to get smaller, let's say village size apartment structures in this project without having to do a 20+ unit project that Down Street would normally ask for. So a really good option is to encourage and make space for what we call ADUs, accessory dwelling units over time. For instance, if someone buys a lot and they don't not have very much money, they may build a very small unit at first to live in. I'm talking 300 or 400 square feet. Those people may over time want to build another, if they have a quarter of an acre, they could easily put another building on that lot. And the original one could become an ADU, or they could extend and somehow have enough room. There's just a lot of different ways to kind of add in density over time. Also, there are some grants available for apartment units that are as small as 4. And we are actively looking for someone who might want to be a landlord, and there are builders that are in the area that would like to help build these small projects. These are typically loans for up to $1 million at 0 to 2% interest. So if anybody in this room knows someone who might be interested, I would strongly encourage them to express their interest on our link. I don't know if anyone's showed that link yet as part of the presentation today, but on the committee's webpage, there is a link to express interest in a lot. And we've also had probably 3 or 4 people asking for rentals. So whereas the list is for prospective lot buyers, they've said they want to rent. And I think that there's just such a backlog in central Vermont for renters. It will not be hard to fill units, but our question is really how many square feet or how many bedrooms the apartments might need. And we'd like to design that into the community concept on February 8th. Thanks.
It's also, just to read Karen Hatcher's comment here, that, you know, thank you. You know, in many ways, we see this project, as somebody said earlier, you know, nobody knew what was happening with Goddard when we started this. And I think while there's been a significant amount of clarity, there's still a lot of things that are up in the air around that. But having spoken with Mike Davidson, who is the owner of Goddard, a number of times myself, I know his plan is to have significant rental housing available there. The conversation there is also worth pointing out. There is no homeowner conversation that is happening at Goddard. That is one individual. And as Mike Davidson likes to say all the time, he's a redeveloper. He's not a developer. He's never built a new building in his life.
That's been 40 years.
He built 2 in 40 years. Okay, sorry. Well, so thank you, Francis Rose. So, and
He also says he doesn't recommend it.
okay. Bad, 2 times the charm. So I think there is, you know, and one of the things that I think is I hope great stuff happens at Goddard as well, and both these projects happen. And I think that would be a lot of vitality and a lot of folks that it would bring to the village in a great positive way. And, you know, there's talk about, well, we need to restore lost tax base, but also if both these things happen, like, what if tax rates went down? You know, that would be kind of amazing. You know, what if water and sewer got cheaper in town instead of getting more expensive every year? You know, these would be pretty cool things in my book as a taxpayer in town. Did you have?
No, I was
Oh,
going to just talk about Goddard.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Janice, yeah.
Thanks, Eli. So I have 2 questions. I've used a lot of discipline to reduce my 30 questions to 2. And but first, I just want to preface it by saying I think you probably all understand how difficult it is to stand up in such and say and have questions about such an emotionally attractive seeming project. Okay, and of course I have, you know, I feel and I appreciate the emotional force of rehousing people who lost everything in the flood, who wouldn't. But considering that, and considering that on Friday, so this is the first question. Sandy said that that she thinks that 4 families who were affected by the flood are interested in this project. Would you think, all of you, do you think it reasonable for the town to vote on this risky venture based on these 4 reported anonymous people or families? Shouldn't this really be a matter of definite known people who will be ready, willing, able, committed? If there is a list, shouldn't it be obviously shared with everyone, with the people who are going to be voting on this? That's my first question. I really want to answer the other one, but if I give up the mic, I'm afraid I won't be able.
I think we should come back. I think we should try and tackle that and then come back to the second question. Yeah. Does anyone
I think Sandy may have a comment. She has her hand raised.
Great.
Sandy, could,
sorry, I forgot to unmute. Um, so I'm really glad that question came up. We now have 25 people who've expressed interest without a lot of advertising for that. And hopefully that list will keep growing. When I said 4 people at the meeting Thursday, I hadn't checked it. So it's actually 6 people, and that is anonymous until they choose to make it public. I just think that's fair. We're collecting space needs, like what people would like to be able to build, to give case studies for people at the design workshop. But to expose people, I think is a little bit premature. And uh, anyways, right now it's about a quarter. And I want to point out that if that number grows, or all of the interest grows over time, and we have more people interested than we have lots, the town will need to come up with some kind of prioritization. So let's say by May, there's people who've been impacted by floods, or people who live downtown now who have not been able to buy a property and they want to. That may be a much, much larger percentage of the final number of buyers. I'd also like to point out that one family who has expressed interest is actually from Barry, and they are flood impacted. So that how that mixes into the prioritization will be discussed later. But it's important to remember that flooding has impacted a lot of other people. And while I have the floor, I want to share, I thought, a fascinating and very sad fact that only 4 years ago, if you looked at all of the people who rent in Vermont, 23% of them had the funds to purchase a house if they wanted to. In other words, 23% of all renters were renting by choice, not by necessity. That number has dropped to 6% as of last year. It's shockingly low. Only 6% of people in Vermont who rent now actually have the means to purchase if they want to. So a major part of this project is to try to figure out how to encourage home ownership without bankrupting people. And also even making them eligible for the subsidies that are available, and all of the helping programs. Michael's been discussing and helping us figure out how to have different ministry groups come in and help build. There's Habitat. There's a number of other ways to keep the cost of construction well below normal. If you look at a developer's subdivision in Chittenden County, houses typically go for 550 to 600,000. And that's not going to work in central Vermont. So we're working really hard to let people who haven't felt like they even had a chance to own put their names on that list.
Yeah, I just would chime in on that one to say that affordable housing in Plainfield was an issue before the floods, and it has only become a bigger issue. And so the need for that has not changed. It's only become more severe. And so this offers an opportunity for us to really work in all these directions simultaneously. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, well, I want to ask the second question, but basically to reiterate, the steering committee has exclusive privilege rights to know whether there are actually committed people who are going to buy this project, to ready and willing and able and committed to this project, and the rest of the town who's being asked to vote on it cannot know these things. So my second question has sort of been discussed a little bit, and also, I mean, the other point there is that the urgency of the project, the stated goals. Okay, this is it, considering, and you discussed this a little bit already, but considering that this project began before Mike Davidson bought Goddard, a purchase that has dramatically changed the financial and housing situation in the town for the better. Mike Davis, at the first select board meeting where he introduced himself to the town, said to the town, how
houses do you want me to provide? How much housing do you want me to provide? 200, 300, let me know. And that statement has been, I feel, sort of dismissed. I don't know whether he was talking about renovating or building or selling off land, we don't know. But we can ask as a town, we could ask him, would you sell 10 acres? Would you, any of these things? In any case, since this project began before we knew about this, the rhetoric has not changed. It continued to say, we are going to replace the taxes, we're going to replace the water sewer, but shouldn't the project have changed its rhetoric? Don't you believe that the risks and benefits should now be assessed in context with the new circumstances? I spoke to Mike Davidson a few days ago, he never heard about this project. Maybe you spoke to him, he knew nothing about it. Maybe you forgot, okay, if you talked to him, he knew nothing about it. I sent him the whole thing. Okay, so there are also other possibilities for restoring the tax base and water sewage income. I think, to go back to my original statement, even if we all agree that there's a problem, we don't always agree that there's only one solution for it. There may be other solutions. So, you know, besides Goddard, there's the inn for sale right downtown. I heard this morning that the town actually owns a 2.20 acre lot behind School Street Apartments. We didn't know about this. I mean, we're told this is the only piece of land, this is the only possibility. So my general question is, shouldn't this be really evaluated in the greater context of the town? I don't think it has been. So thanks.
Was that a question?
Was there a question there? I missed it if there was.
But I think there was.
Okay, okay.
First of all, the representative from the Goddard Project has been attending the weekly meetings at the, called the Funny Group, which is also, which Aaron is part of. And Goddard has been very actively aware of what the project is, because the expansion comes up often in that discussion. Also, Mike Davidson, whom I occasionally have conversations with, knows, as was said before, that he's not going to build new buildings. So I'm not sure, Janice, where the 200 to 300 units came from. He may have been very, very optimistic and not checked. Just let me finish with that. He had a vision that the area that is now those sort of squarish dorms, that the dorms themselves could be turned into something else. In other words, instead of being dorms, they could be 2-unit or 4-unit houses. There's a calculation there about how many can be put together. And right now they're being used for temporary housing for displaced people or unhoused people. So it's not clear what the time frame is there. But it's been under consideration. There is more knowledge going back and forth, and Mike has a lot of stuff going on, so he might have just missed it. And I don't know the answer to the other question. I'm just addressing that one part. Lauren?
Yeah, I would just say that as a member of the steering committee, I mean, I personally, and someone whose house has been flooded multiple times, I personally have expressed interest in buying a lot. That doesn't mean that I would necessarily buy a lot because the project hasn't been approved yet. And I know other neighbors, I guess Sandy's saying now it's 6. I know who some of them are, and I don't think it's unreasonable that people would want that information to be private until the project goes through. Although we could certainly ask their permission if they want to have their names be made public. You know, I think also I feel a little weird about that, just knowing that anyone who's going out to look at real estate and is about to try to purchase a lot through a realtor, it's not like that interaction is made public to the entire town, you know, that someone is interested in buying X house, Y, or Z. So I just point that out.
Maybe just, I also want to correct one thing that came up, which is that steering committee does not know the names of these people.
Louder? Yeah.
We do not know the names, we do not know the names of these people. First, there is an agent. Sandy Bissum is one of them, perhaps, but it's a confidential process like any other buying process, in any other situation. We have sometimes attorneys involved, and sometimes they have the property owner, but it's all speculative. And there's an easy way to get a sense of an individual person who might be really serious about doing this, but asking The steering committee in general does not know this list. We do not discuss it amongst ourselves. We do not know who these people are.
Well, you at least know that well,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know who one of them is, but before that, I didn't know who any of the interested parties were. We don't know, we don't wanna know, it's not really our business.
And so I also just. Oh, is there? I also just wanted to say, like, any like misinformation or like information that hasn't been provided or that ends up being wrong or that like. There's so much weird communication going on that happens informally or that only individual people have. So I'm like standing in front of everybody, I'm really scared of saying something that ends up being wrong. I just want you all to know that it's not, any information that you all provide to me, I'm assuming is because you are interested in protecting your own security or interested in uplifting the security of the people around you. I assume goodwill, right? Please assume the same of us. We're all trying our best. Yeah.
Before we move on to another in-person, there's a couple comments up here. Kim, I didn't know if you were unmuting to read that. I'm happy to.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kim. I'm chiming in because I'm on the steering committee. And as I hear this question raised, it seems like the foundation of it is a concern of what if lots don't sell. In addition to the anonymous interest, in addition to the soft commitments from Downstreet and Habitat, which don't have to be totally anonymous, and that's very interesting. There are real estate norms, and the group has worked with a very experienced real estate broker to address whether or not is it a concern that these will sell or not. It seems like it is very attractive to have buildable lots, especially if they are affordable and well under market rate. So I guess I'm saying, what is the real concern here? That they won't sell, and we don't know anything with absolute certainty, but we can look at a lot of information to determine what the norms are to make a pretty reasonable guess. So if we're in range.
Thanks, Kim. I think now we would go back to a person in person, and then next we'll get to Sandy after that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question that wasn't related. Is that right to move into another question, or are we okay here? I had a question. So when we saw the lot breakdowns with the quarter acre lots and the eighth quarter or the eighth acre lots, I didn't see much discussion of what that non-buildable area is. Is that something that would stay in ownership of the town? Is that something that is included in the lot division? And if so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about it and who the maintenance on that would fall to, and kind of who would have control over what that would look like. If it would look like city parks, our hayfield, our gardens.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, oh, Sandy, thank you for saving me.
So I'm gonna just back up in the conversation for 2 seconds. The issue of affordability is the #1 issue in Vermont. It continues to be the #1 issue in Vermont. And a big part of that is affordable living. It's a national issue right now, and it's extremely big issue in central Vermont. So I think we always need to look at that in this context, and how can we lower the prices as much as possible is key to making that actually affordable to more people. It's such an issue that I don't think this is an either or question, either Goddard or smaller properties in the village itself, or this 23 acre parcel. I think it's an if and as many as possible can be brought online, the better. It's a really important thing to remember, is a service to our neighbors. Now, yeah, that lot has quite a bit of area that's shown as not buildable. There are many things that can happen So there are many reasons why that's there and also what can happen with it. So there's setbacks, there's zoning setbacks, there's some steep slope areas, particularly along the old railroad track, and there are some wet areas. And so what will happen with those is going to be at the first level decided during the design workshop. And I really hope that everybody will come to that. We're so excited. I think we have 60 people now that are signed up. And we've decided to take as many as will come. We'll figure out how to make this work. And it's going to be a really fun day. The purpose of that is to come up with 2 or 3 designs and then at a public meeting soon after that, narrow it down to 1, like really soon afterwards, because we have to then price it before the actual town meeting. So the groups will have choices of public space that is basically town owned, off the grand list, or they could become part of the small lots. For instance, some open area could create some lots that are larger, but not buildable. In other words, conserved land or agricultural land. There are a lot of possibilities there. So it would either be public or private. Also, one must not forget that there's a certain number of acres that are going to have to go to things like roads and utilities. So it's all in the mix right now. And we're going to be asking the design groups to take in account total cost and total revenue. So they can help us, so they can also understand what we're under to try to balance the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. I think our last question was in person, so we'll go to Karen and then we'll go. So I think,
Karen next, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, Karen next, because that's Sandy responding to a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that me? So Karen Hatcher?
yes.
Yeah, thank you. So what I wanted to do is just say thank you to this group and to express my appreciation for all of the work that's gone in over the months to bring this to us. It can't be underappreciated or underestimated, the amount of time and energy and passion and hours and all of it from a citizen group, from a volunteer group. And I just really want to extend my appreciation. And I also just want to say that if people are not happy with this proposal, that does not preclude another group of people from forming and creating a new proposal for something else. But short of that, this is a really good one in my opinion. And I really just wanted to just put a note on it, just put a point on it, because this is not a small thing that you people have done. It is a pretty large endeavor and it's a bit of a miracle. So I just want to thank you for all the good work.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Okay, I never do this correctly, so tell me if you can't hear me. I never hold it in the right way. I'm Alicia Weiss. About 15 years ago, I wouldn't known it. Everyone in the room was over to Goddard, but we all know what happened there. I also want to recognize the intense passion and the work of the committee. And I think, Rick, the contribution of your expertise for me has brought a lot to us. I want to recognize that. I think we all feel the pain of people who lost houses, any of us who've been through personal disasters. I didn't lose a house, that's what I've been through personal disasters, feel it. And I know that as someone who's loved Plainfield since I was 18, I can remember why I walked into a room. You know, my heart bleeds every time I go through the buildings that were lost. But I do have some reservations, and it's not, some of them are with the project, but frankly, some of them are with the process. Many communities, and I know communities don't often have the luxury of doing community planning. Somebody sells land to a developer and they're Bob's your uncle. But that's not what we're talking about here. But most communities start with a strategic planning process where they set goals. What do we want the community to look like? What do we want the density to be? I've heard density talked about almost as though it's an unconditional good. I think we would all agree we don't want the same density as maybe larger towns have, as maybe towns down south have. That's, I think that would have been the right process. And then to be informed by that, a group to bring forth a proposal would have, informed by that, as I said, would have made a lot more sense to me. Whereas right now, the shape that this is taken, and through no fault of your own, everybody's hard work is driving the conversation. I think that's creating a lot of discomfort and maybe giving rise to some of what, you know, I really regret you feel about, gee, is this question a gotcha? So that's, I think this is backwards and I think it's too fast. I think we should decide what our values and our goals are first. And I know that we feel a sense of urgency, but I can't believe that if this is not a good project and if affordable housing continues to be as much of an issue in Vermont, and I know it will, I can't believe we won't have the same interest in another 6 months, even a year. And support, possibly more, because you might be able to bring more people to speak to it. Not everyone's gonna agree, that's my sense. I'm not a financial wizard. So I just want, and sometimes when numbers fly by me, I don't get them. So these are not gotcha questions, I'm genuinely asking for clarification, because I'm trying to understand. We lost 28 homes in the village, 39 units, you know, maybe some of them were apartments, but I think it was 39 buildings. Can somebody tell me what number of those were actually in the village themselves, rather than sort of out on Brook Road and what might not be considered the village, because I just don't know.
My rough guess is 2/3 were in the village.
Okay,
And
thank
the
you.
rest are out Great Brook.
Okay, thank you. So,
But Arian has. the-
I can give you the exact count if you'll
Okay,
bear with
thank
me
you.
for 1 second.
well, the man with numbers.
Yeah,
Is like the yellow zone of that map, is that what you're saying?
And I should say to speak to Alana's question about the yellow circles, is that map was not originally made to be part of this discussion. That map was made to guide us in visualizing how that space would be worked with. In other words, what kind of town park or whatever would be. In other words, it was just to deal with that particular stretch of land that had so many lost houses. How would we think about its use in the future? It was not going to be part of this whole discussion.
so there are 19 structures that have put in for buyouts in the village. Some of the, at least three of those are multi-unit structures.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
In the village.
in the village.
And
And then,
then
as
there are
Michael
more.
said, there's quite a few that go out Brook Road, some of which are gone already and some of which are at risk.
Heaven knows how many over the years ago from Brick Road. I'm trying to, maybe Arian can answer this, I'm just trying to follow. My understanding was, we're talking about, you know, we're looking for, if we, the number of houses you predicted, lots you predicted selling in the first year, and a boost in the property tax therefore of 40K, is that correct?
I think it's a reasonably conservative estimate that if we can pre-sell or we can sell basically simultaneously with the start of this project at 10 or more lots, that the new tax revenue 1 year later, because I also said that the first year we're gonna get a marginal amount of tax revenue. There's something, because the land is worth something, but the housing or the buildings are always what's actually worth more in a property tax valuation. That will cover that interest. I personally expect that lots will sell that we will sell all lots relatively quickly, but I think from a conservative estimated standpoint, I believe that selling at least 10 out of the gate is pretty good. And I do think that some people will move quicker than others in building that. Certainly, if you have groups like Down Street or Habitat for Humanity, those guys buy a lot and they like move right in and start doing stuff. That's a quick execution.
So the notion is that that would annually cover that 40K interest that we have to pay every year.
If each property conservatively brings in $4,000 of new money, that would cover that interest at that period of time. Of course, every subsequent property reduces both the interest payment that we have to make and adds to the tax rolls.
Okay, but the tax boost from the additional units that's going to the interest won't all be going to the property tax fund. It'll such, I mean, it won't all stay there because some of it will go to the interest. What?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to understand things, Thursdays, the vagaries of, these fixed interest, unamortized loans, which is not something I knew existed to begin with. So by the end of 10 years, we need to pay back, could be in a lump sum, it could be dribbling in, we need to pay back all that money. I guess one of my concerns, we have a really fragile town budget and it's tiny. We don't know that we're not going to be hit by other disasters or unforeseen issues. And I guess I'm not asking for an answer.
We might need to move town hall up there.
Crystal ball, but
Yeah.
I just want to go on record to say I find that scary.
I mean, I think the future is by definition uncertain because it hasn't happened yet, but I think from our perspective, given the current real estate market, of which we've talked extensively a fair bit today, the likelihood that these lots don't sell within 10 years, while a non-zero possibility, I think we also are saying, we're asking as part of this vote, do we as a town want to bet on Plainfield? Do we want to bet that we're still going to be here as a town? Do we want our town to be stronger in 10 years than it is right now? And I think if that a bet that we want to take as a town is part of this vote. And I think I'm certainly willing to bet on the side of Plainfield. I want to see this town be more vigorous 10 years from now rather than less vigorous.
And I want to bet on Plainfield too, but I'm not sure that risk is,
I think what,
is unsubstantial.
I think there's a good question what our
I'd like to
alternative
speak
is.
to the
Yeah.
fact that it's come up a number of times, what will our future risk be from flooding?
Yeah.
And I have to point out one really good thing, one reassuring thing, it's based on something terrible, is that every one of the houses that has been damaged so far, and this also includes 3 going back to 2023 along the Winooski, that are already bought out and already been approved for buyout, is that these houses are in the floodplain, these houses are exposed to risk. As they go out, the number of houses that can do further risks are reduced, but also it gives the river the room to move back and forth and dissipate its energy. So we're actually reducing flood risk in the village by telling people they can be bought out and they can leave that house behind and get someplace better. So it's a strategy called hazard mitigation, which is to reduce the risk.
We all want to see hazard mitigation, and I think Michael deserves I don't know what kind of award, good karma, for everything he's done. I just moved back to town after being officially here, but back and forth for a number of years, and I'm still awed by what you've been doing. I'm not just thinking, by the way, of disasters, of floods, although I know they're very much on our mind. I'm thinking about, I don't know, was it 10, 15 years ago, when, for various economic reasons, the real estate market became terrible. People had for sale signs and were trying to sell houses and lots for a very long time, and the money just wasn't there. So I just think we all know there are unknowns, and I guess it's how lucky we feel. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think before we move on, Sandy has a hand raised.
You keep doing that. To move backwards through the responses, and those were really good points to make. I don't know the details about Northfield, but they were really hit hard by Irene, which is what now 13 years ago. And they bought out a number of houses. If I remember correctly, it's 6. And that that sort of, what do you call it, river corridor was restored. And they did very well in the last 2 floods. So it is a sign of better things to come for Plainfield, at great cost, of course. I wanted to respond to the question about a strategic plan and other early planning. and I personally will apologize if I haven't shared my early work well enough with others. But we're the goal, as far as I understand it, has always been to follow the town plan. The town plan is not that old, and it's a very good strategic plan. And as far as I understand it, the village district, all of the zoning ordinances around it are to basically enforce and expand and enrich the lower village as a model. So we've really just extended that to this property because it is in that same zoning district. It makes it easy. We're not trying to put a square peg into a round hole in terms of the town plan. I also wanted to point out why we're doing this so fast. It's been mentioned already, but it might be worth repeating it, is because so many towns in Vermont have been really hit and the housing affordability question is so severe, there are a lot of eyes on this particular solution that Plainfield's undertaking. So typically a private developer would do a project like this, or one of the NGOs, a non-government organization like Downstreet. And they both end up with really high priced products. So we are trying to break the mold and do things the way they were done 150 years ago. Most of the United States towns were developed by municipalities who put in the infrastructure and sold the lots. So why not try to do this for the 21st century? We asked. People are so very interested that they're really supporting us, including paying for the engineering studies right up front. We're so grateful for this help from outside groups. We cannot be sure that money will be available and the expertise will be available next year. So thank you.
I think you're next, and then Stephen, and then the fellow in the back.
Who did you want to see?
You first, and then the fellow in the back, actually, Stephen, 1, 2, 3.
John Oxford, I live on East Hill Road. Alicia actually asked most of the questions I had. I did want to know where you got your numbers on, or how you figured the numbers on the average lot tax income, because I can tell you my taxes, more than half of it is school and it doesn't come to the town. So is that part of your factoring, or was that the total taxes?
I can respond to that, and that is, so new money is new money from a tax standpoint, and the reality is if we add a new parcel to town, the school budget does not go up, so it offsets other funding. And so the new money does equal new money in this circumstance. I know that we think about our tax bill as two separate parts, but the reality is that it's actually one tax bill. And so the simplest way to explain that is that new money is new, because if we got one new property and they raised $2,000 in more school taxes, the school budget did not change. We don't send that $2,000 to the school. That money actually stays with the town and offsets other taxes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my other question, unrelated, is the website for this committee says that we will need to get either an Act 250 exemption or the NDA designation. This obviously doesn't meet Vermont's environmental protection rules. Why is that?
I don't quite follow the
I think
question.
it does have to meet Vermont's environmental protection.
Then why do you need an exemption from Act 250?
And I haven't followed this as closely as Sandy is, and we can shift to her again if you'd like, but ANR, Agency of Natural Resources.
I work for the state, I understand.
Well, not everybody does, not everybody does. Review is still required for a project like this, so that's what I think of when you say that.
It said Act 250 exemption, and that tells me it's not really subject to Act 250 rules.
I think with the goal of Act 250 in general and of the NDA is to return more control for development back to the towns. And
Yes,
so
and less
that
control
is-
of the individual. That's
that-
exactly what it is.
No, back to the towns from the state.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not so much a
And it
state.
takes away our right to appeal decisions and whatnot. It's very clear on their website.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
was
it
there,
does
was
give the
there, a
town more
que-
control.
did you
Right.
have, did
That's
you have a
exactly it.
question for us then?
I wanted to know why it would need an exemption.
I don't think it would need, I don't think it would need. an
The website
exemption,
says that,
but-
that's all I'm going by.
Okay.
So the fellow behind you is the one there. I can't see who it is. Oh, okay, yes.
Well, does Sandy want to speak to that?
That's what I was thinking.
I'd be really happy to. So Act 250 started to be adjusted a couple years ago by the legislature. And it has fast-tracked housing and it has reduced appeal paths statewide. So that's really beyond the realm of Plainfield as a town. But at the same time, they have not wanted to reduce oversight of very important issues. And most people in the room probably know that Act 250 oversees 10 criteria for approval. And they include natural resources, they include stormwater, they include ability to serve by any septic wastewater system, water systems, schools, emergency services. There's historic resources, and there's traffic, and there's gosh, I can't think of the others. Air and removing things out of the ground are a couple of others. There's a big list. So as they've been trying to make the process for getting new houses built quicker, easier, more direct without losing quality of protection, they've come up with the NDA, and this is the new, like chapter 3 that used to include growth centers and designated downtowns or designated villages. So they're actually just kind of phasing out those programs going towards the NDA. The NDA, to get an NDA, the municipality has to show that they have ample jurisdiction, in other words, the court ordinance and people to review the project before that designation is given to the town. So Plainfield's going through that right now for the whole town. Well, they're asking for one area of the town larger than the current designated village. And at the same time, they are making the ordinance more detailed to fill those requirements by the state. And so actually at the town level, neighbor and any citizen input is going to be increased. The natural resources, so I'll back up and say, as part of getting the NDA is showing that you do not have any major things that have to be reviewed by the state for those categories. So you have to show wildlife corridors, you have to show river corridors, you have to show wetlands. Basically you go through all of the 10 criteria. But separate from that is the permitting process. And as Rick pointed out, you cannot disturb more than an acre of land in Vermont without triggering primary review. You have to get a construction permit. And that also looks at all of these natural resources and other criteria. So this project is going through all of those reviews because it's more than 1 acre. And I hope that explains it. So does that explain your question? I'm glad to answer more.
What does NDA stand for?
Neighborhood Development Area designation.
It's basically a new state term. It's replacing the growth area and the designated village, which had its own set of, statutory rules.
We have a new question in the back.
Yeah, I'd like to address the loan or bond, I've heard it called the loan and the bond of $2.5 million approximately. First of all, 2% 10-year interest only is phenomenal interest rate. If you went in the current market right now, you probably couldn't borrow less than 10% if you didn't do it through state agency. I'm assuming it's a state agency. I'd like to know what credit we're putting up for the loan. Is it the full faith and credit of the town of Plainfield? I look back, I have one property taxes. Is it the land that we're using to develop these 29 properties? So if you didn't sell one property, who pays the $2.5 million back? Is it the town? Do they foreclose on the property? Do we know that?
It's the Vermont Community Foundation who would be loaning us the money, so it's not a state actor. They're a private philanthropic foundation, and the collateral would be the land as developed.
So the town is not on the hook.
Well, the town is the borrower. But so if they were to foreclose upon it, I mean, ultimately they would seize the land. I'm sure, like many of us know, foreclosure is a complicated process, and there likely you would reach some kind of alternative arrangement. But yes, there is a certain amount of risk associated with this.
That's no risk.
I'm sorry?
Then there's no risk to the town. If what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, there's no risk to the town, it's a great deal.
It would be, I mean, effectively the town would default and we would foreclose. They would foreclose on the land and seize it.
That particular land.
Yes. That's the collateralization
So
of the
what
loan.
you lose is what you're- Okay, so the only thing you lose is what you're about to gain.
That's been the I would emphasize, we have not drafted definitive agreements at this point. So but in terms of the conversation of how the loan would be collateralized, that is the conversation.
Amazing. And I've spent 45 years in this.
Stephen Callahan?
Yeah, yeah.
Betsy says, thank you, Alicia, for stating that this loan poses a big financial risk to the town. We don't have to be the vanguard in this type of project. Have you looked into forming a nonprofit or asking Down Street to take this on?
I could just respond to that is that this is not a project that Down Street would do as constructed. Down Street builds buildings. This is putting in infrastructure and doing lots. So they much more are the later phase is the kind of project that they would do. To my knowledge, there is no nonprofit developer that does anything like this. This would be a municipal action and becoming that essentially nonprofit developer at a break-even rate. So that I hope that answers the question, that there is not really that option.
I could just add to that, the Down Street is one of 5 organizations that is they're private, not-for-profit organizations, but they have a special designation in that they represent a region of the state for which they provide housing, and they also are an accredited lender, I believe, is the way that you would describe Down Street. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Down Street, but they have done a number of absolutely phenomenal projects in the area, including some tiny houses in Barry for people that are developmentally can't live with other people. They've done the housing, they did the housing in Montpelier, which was the only building to not be flooded during the flood. I mean, there are pictures, the transportation center I've taken tours of probably 5 different Down Street properties, including one for mothers and children, mothers who have substance abuse issues in downtown Barry, the transportation building in downtown Montpelier. They're really an incredible organization, but they are not, this particular project, they would take on this portion that they've expressed interest in. The other thing that I would say from the perspective of having been a fundraiser and a development professional in Vermont for 30-some years, I would express, first of all, real concern about forming another nonprofit in central Vermont. to deal with this. First of all, I don't think many of them could or would do it. Secondly, there are 6,200 or more nonprofits in the state of Vermont, which we have more nonprofits per capita than almost any other state in the United States. And having served on fundraising committees for the demolition of the project across the street, for parking, having served on the fundraising committee for the Plainfield Co-op, having been tangentially involved in seeing the Plainfield Area Community Trust try to get involved, and not ruling out the fact that Goddard at some point in the future might want to return to nonprofit status. I have no idea. We have the Adamant Music School. We have hundreds of nonprofits in this area. And the idea that a nonprofit could take on this project and viably raise the money for it it's not impossible, but it's a huge heavy lift. And this project offers us an opportunity to take advantage of existing expertise, and having the Vermont Community Foundation be behind this project is really incredible. The Vermont Community Foundation, for those of you who are not familiar with it, you should look at their website. They're a very great organization.
Steven's next. I'm just gonna read Betsy's comment as we're getting Steven the microphone. Betsy says, I suggest a group of citizens like this committee form a nonprofit.
Can oh shoot, Kirsty, before next person speaks, can I just say something quickly?
Yes, and the room here has emptied almost for the folks on screen. So when we're asking questions, if we can keep our answers concise, that would be beneficial.
I don't know if it got said today, but this loan is like a home equity loan, that the indebtedness increases only as money is taken out of it. So it's not a huge financial risk. We have to do the final engineering, but the town, there are ways that the town cannot purchase the land, certainly not sell lots until the costs are more certain.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sure,
Stephen.
as Stephen Callahan, as a point of order, I'd like to say just that Sandy keeps talking repeatedly while Plainfield residents keep leaving. I hate to complain, but that's a serious problem. We should be priority here. I have a sort of a suggestion, kind of a question, which is that it occurred to me that down there on the part of the land down on the Main Street extension, there is a lot over there. And even the committee has thought that it would be a good idea to put maybe 3 lots down there. Now, suppose we actually put 3 large multi-dwelling houses there. They would be right on the road. There would be no need to pay over $1 million to put a road in. They'd be right on the electricity, probably right on the sewage. Would it make sense to think of maybe doing this project in a more step-by-step, timely, organic fashion so that we can see how things are going? Now, if we had these 3 buildings, which also had commercial aspects on the first floors, how many units could fit in these? Perhaps each of them maybe 6, 8, 12, I'm not sure, but we could get off to a good start for the people who immediately need housing, especially people who lost the apartments in Heartbreak and the white building on the corner there. And we'd have a more better idea of what we're doing, how we're going, because we are in a very difficult, debt-ridden condition right now. And is this the time to be advancing on a risky business? How about if we just started out with a half of a project or a third of a project? Because I hear so many comments saying we're going too fast, we're nervous, this is risky. How about if we actually thought of it that way? And also, I haven't heard anything from the committee about whether the committee is considering the actual plausible passability of this bill by the town. If you ask the town to just suddenly fork over or whatever, $2.5 million, and you actually tell them what the price of the land is, $600,000, as a sheet. The sheet was given to us by Sandy, which had the price on it. What is gonna be the reaction? Would the committee consider the town might even have a better chance of getting this through? Getting the whole thing through if it were more reasonable, plausible, careful, organic? Because I think what's really missing in the speeded up process is the organic aspect, when things grow in a careful, thoughtful, pleasurable, aesthetic way. What we have up in the field up there is a beautiful vista. It's a rural, it's what people came to Plainfield for. And when you hurry things up and you start losing these things, you start losing actually a desirability of the whole town. Is it a beautiful place? Is it somewhere you want to live? Or is it a place where there are certain crowded kind of artificial places thrown in higgledy-piggledy where they are not obeying the most essential aspect of town planning and development, which is that a development should be within the character of the surrounding area. So again, my suggestion is, can we consider a compromise? All right.
The good conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer your question on the technical basis, Stephen. I mean, it's like predicting the future. But what I can say is that for those of us who, I mean, I would love to have 5, 6, 20 acres, but I've got less than an acre and I'm in the middle of the village. I came for a village that had a neighborhood. My whole neighborhood's gone. I lost what I came in the sense of my immediate sense of what is the aesthetic or the beauty or the wonder of being in Plainfield. I had lots of neighbors I know, and many of them are moving away. I'm going to be sitting there alone. And so, you know, each of us wanting our own particular future is sensible. I mean, it's really important. We all want what we thought aesthetically the best of all worlds is. This is not the best of all worlds. We've gotten really torn apart. And it's going to feel really different. I'm not going to see the Plainfield that I originally saw in 1972 or 1982. It's constantly evolving, it's changing. And it's in a time when the entire world is on stress. In other words, we're in a world of diminishing resources. The amount of food everybody needs is not being produced in the world. The amount of land that everybody needs to live on is not available in the world. The climate changes are reducing by great thousands of acres at a rapid clip, areas that are habitable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people are going to need houses are going to be out of the world. Wishing I could have things the way they were just isn't taking into account how many other people are under stress and like much more than I am. I only lost a furnace. I don't, I mean, I didn't lose my whole house this time. But I had lost my whole house. It burned down completely to the ground. In Montpelier, it was a major event, lost everything I owned. So I'm very sympathetic with the people whose houses have disappeared with every little one of their possessions. But it isn't that urgency. It's the fact that we have a ton of expertise. We have people who are volunteering. When you said UPenn, maybe it went by, but it's University of Pennsylvania. Graduate students came here to help. We have resources climbing to the roof at this moment. And LA just lost 11,000 homes and counting. you know, and all those resources are gonna be in LA next year, okay? But we're taking advantage of what has already come to it as being our very friendly, loving, helping, generous people who are coming out of the woodwork to help us at this moment. That's the only urgency. It's just to take advantage of what we have while we have it.
We should, Eli, you want
So-
to say that we're.
Yeah, there's some sense of urgency in the meeting right now, right? I think, thank you all for being here for so long. I really appreciate it. I kind of want to say a few things, and I'm sorry to take up more time, but I just wanted to highlight some things that you said, which were the speed of things really seems to be a scary part of this for everybody, right? That was true for me too. So maybe there's a compromised vote that could be put forward where we're not trying to push this whole project through in this one vote. That's an idea. Just wanted to reiterate that. And then I also wanted to highlight the this tension between the desirability, right? You all live here because you like the way that things are, right? Vermont is the way that it is, and people want to move here or buy houses here or settle here or change from rental people to landowners here because of the way that it is. And there's a fear that opening this land up would change the way that it is. I don't know. That tension really is emotional for me. Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight that. You had, yeah. Do you, oh, you've got a question too? Right, yeah, it's great. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Bob Atchison, Energy Coordinator and Climate Warrior, and all of us in the room are climate warriors. And some haven't moved into the full battle yet, but certainly much gratitude for this committee that's been working here. I would just like to, it's not really slowing it down because there are people that are hurting. There are people that don't have a place to live. And, you know, trying to solve that problem is immediate. The thing that I would like to suggest is, this is a reactive act that we're doing. You know, the flood came, people lost, houses were lost, and now we're rebuilding and getting it back together. I would also like to, as we reconstruct the village and find new ways and new housing lots and everything else, that we over-engineer, that we figure out how to do a thermal energy network up there, that we don't have to burn things anymore to heat our houses, to produce our energy. And I haven't heard one word about space for renewables, you know, on this property up there. So it's very important that you think about that as you go along. I'm available. I want to come to the workshop on the 8th. And I also, the town is moving forward with some energy conservation projects and fuel switching projects that are the result of a grant that we received. So you'll see some of that start coming up, but just please feel that I'm a resource and you're free to come to me and ask anything you want. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But what I'm hearing here is a lot of angst about money, right? I'm on 2 nonprofit boards myself. I totally understand the work you're going through. To me, it would make sense for you as a what can I call you, a board, as a committee, to actually come up with a real prospectus, business plan, something with actual real perspective numbers, timelines, that kind of thing, would make all of us feel better about the money. That's just, I realize that like any business, there's a lot up in the air, right? You don't know all the answers, but you've obviously got estimates. You've got that kind of thing. The numbers you presented are very nebulous. There are no details behind them. There's no way for anyone to actually analyze them right now.
They are, I mean, I think one thing that's important is that these are worst case scenario numbers as developed by an engineering firm that does this all day, every day. And so if we want to have, I'm not sure that it's the best use of a community conversation to analyze the price of plumbing and roadworks, because
I'm not saying that we
Yeah.
need to, I'm saying it would make a lot of us feel better if we could see the actual real proposed numbers.
and if we have an engineering firm that says this is the worst case scenario and we feel confident about that, then we have, I mean, why would we not just work from that?
You've given us a $2.5 million budget, you haven't said what they said plumbing was gonna cost, or like water, sewer, roads, all that, we don't know what the numbers are.
Hmm.
John, it was.
Could
important point that-
I just want to ask a question of clarity. What do you mean by that? Because I struggle with this often. I've done this for a long, long time. And the real challenge is that there are always unknowns in a project like this.
Absolutely.
It's unavoidable. What you're doing is somewhat reach into the future for something that's better, and you can't know everything about construction if you've been involved in
Fully
that.
understand that.
You can't know everything about it. So what would help you in terms of detail?
You had a basis for coming up with these numbers. Right? I mean, all we've seen is $2.5 million.
No, but what,
Right.
tell me what it is that would help you, because I struggle with this.
The engineering report,
I'm an engineer, I'm totally capable of reading engineering report, but that's not. Telling the citizens of Plainfield that we want you to spend $2.5 million, trust us, is the real problem here.
Right. So,
Okay.
wait, but I'm just trying to get to the detail of
Let me
it.
just ask one thing that maybe is not shoved under the carpet a little bit, is that the way this loan is structured, if I understand from Marion, is that if we say in year one, and I'm trying to think what the business plan would look like, but in year one, if we have 3 solar lots that represent $500,000. Immediately, that's not having to be paid interest on, and it's just the principal has been taken down, just like a line of credit, which is the word that was used. So if the next 6 months, we then have a waiting list of people, and it turns into 4 more sales, or 6 more sales, immediately the principal goes down and we're not paying as much interest again. It's not an amortized interest, it's a simple interest. And so as each year goes by, we're actually not borrowing 2 million, we're borrowing 100 and, or 1.5 million or something. And so that probably could be spec'd out if that would help,
Just to see if I'm understanding, are you saying you'd like something like this that has this like breakdown of the engineering costs and the roads and all that with numbers next to it?
I think that would help
Cost of the
people.
land.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get from you. That's great.
Right, the cost of the
Thanks.
land, the cost of
Thanks,
building the roads.
thanks.
And understand, we understand its estimates, nobody knows what this is
Yeah.
gonna be,
Right.
but you came up with that number somehow, right?
Some of them are, some of the issues that we struggle with is the land cost. We've struggled to keep that confidential, and you always have to. So some of them would have to be ranges of cost potentially, John, but I think I see where you're going in terms of what does this cost and how does it relate to the really clever and very, very fortuitous payback that the town has. How do the costs, that's your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
thank you.
business plan,
Thank
right?
you.
I mean,
That's
what are we
perfect.
gonna spend and how are we gonna get that money?
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
It's not hard.
No,
and you have to sell this proposal to the town.
Yeah, and, right, we need to see it before town meeting.
yeah.
So if that's information we have available, I'd be happy to.
I think, we have worst case scenario budgets at this point, and we are but we are also expecting, Sandy, can you talk to the time frame on this where we're expecting even more refined numbers?
Yeah, I can. I do not know where the town is in their negotiations about the land sale. That is a big portion of the project. The engineer is working right now on all the parts of the project that are known. Basically, all the connections from the actual new neighborhood down to the village, including the utilities. We've also gotten beginning electrical prices for getting the large infrastructure in for for power. The inside the neighborhood, we have unit costs. And I think, because we don't know where the roads yet or how long they are or exactly what the impervious area is from each house. So, but we have guesses that we've been juggling. The intention is to give some better numbers to the town as they create their warning. And then within a week or two after the charrette, we're hoping to start getting something that would look more like a pro forma together and a real cost estimate. And then certainly before the town meeting, we'll be at what we call schematic level or bond worthy numbers.
And one clarification on the bond, on the town meeting, the actual discussion will happen prior to what we call town meeting. It'll be a meeting just to discuss this project. It's a separate one.
Yeah, because as required, as this goes to Australian ballot, we have to hold a different meeting that is not the same thing as town meeting about the balloted item per state law. So that's, because we'd have if we're a voice vote thing, we'd have that discussion at town meeting, but because this has to be a balloted item, you have to have a separate meeting for it. We will have those numbers. So I think just to put a little more color on one of the things Sandy said, like right now, I don't remember what the numbers are, but we're assuming X number linear feet of road. And because we don't know where the final road design is, but we can, once we are done with the design charrette, put a final road design and a final pricing and then make those numbers available because it is, it will be more accurate and more realistic. And I think there is also a little bit of, you don't want to send out a data set over and over and over again, right? Like everybody's seen that one Word document that was final version 6. And you're like, which version are we actually working on here? So, we want to send these numbers out once. We want them to be based on the actual design that the town puts together. And that's why for these meetings and for the bond vote, which we have to warn, we had to come up with a number that we said, look, if you throw everything at it and then some, this is the number. So, but we do want to just, the final number that will be from engineering based on actual schematic designs, based on the actual design that is done on the design day. We want to put that out once.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, but I saw the schedule, and maybe it's changed, but those schematic numbers were expected to come in on March 3rd, which may be just one day before town meeting. Is that actually enough time for the people of Plainfield to think about, even if it's a week before, just speaks to the speed. You could have another meeting in 6 months. I know it costs the town money to do that. But I predict that at this point with these kind of questions, it's not gonna pass. If you want this to pass, I really, recommend that you slow down, but Stephen had a couple, can I just?
Hey, we do kind of want to wrap it up. I know we are we're an hour past schedule at this point, just as a frame of reference.
I said two brief remarks. One is that in human nature, I think you keep talking about this as a maximum estimation, but what we know from usually estimates is they're often 50% more than what you get estimated or double what you get estimated. That is human nature. That is experienced by people who are older than 21. Catch on that. That's how human nature works. The other thing I just wanted to add to my earlier statement was that I think this time is good while more time to just do this by steps while we figure out what's going on with Goddard and all these other houses. So we have a real idea of the whole picture before we're ready to vote on anything. That's all.
I think Sandy wants to answer some of the last questions.
I can easily let it go. All I was going to say is that with careful estimation and early identifying things that may be unknowns very early in the process. For instance, we just did the test pits to see if we might have to blast. It's really, the process is like a magnifying glass or a microscope getting sharper and sharper images by stages We're in concept right now. We're going to be finished schematic by town meeting. And then we'll do the final designs and we'll be at construction documents hopefully by June. And then we'll be having bids in July, if all goes according to plan. And at no point do we expect the town to get into a risky situation. And we are doing our best to start sketching out how cash flow will work. And we're taking this very seriously, but it's not necessarily constructive to share details when they're not fixed enough to talk about.
And I think to just chime in on Sandy's point, that if the bids were to somehow come back way more than the engineers estimated, you know, this is still all expenditures are subject to select board approval. I mean, I would certainly, if they came back and they were twice what we all thought they were going to be, I would not advocate to the select board that the project move forward. So there are certain steps that are sequential that we have to take one before the other.
And if the project.
I can
fails
say
at
that we're
vote-
using the state unit costs, which are very high. Assuming FEMA bidding conditions, federal bidding conditions, and we're adding contingencies to that. And we're being super conservative. The idea is that as the microscope gets more focused, the numbers get smaller, not bigger.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
If the project fails at vote, if we don't provide enough information that you feel secure voting yes, and the project fails, and then we take another 6 months and provide more information so that you feel secure, so you can vote yes, that would be, I wouldn't be against that. It would just mean. that-
Someone else brings another proposal. Anyone can bring any proposal.
Right.
Anytime.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank everybody for coming.
Yeah.